Welcome, folks. This is VR Playmakers. This is your host tonight, TTaogaming, and tonight we have a very special guest, SirDimwi. SirDimwi is one of the person that I have always looked up to. When I first started the game, he was the first person that actually casted one of the games that I first played in Rookie Cup in what was it, 2020? So it's been like 2 years
Yeah,
and
some of that.
change. Yeah, man. So I always love SirDimwi. Doc loves SirDimwi, and I am so excited to have him here with us tonight. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm now I'm actually adding everyone in the SirDimwi server to send them over here with a link. So maybe we'll get a couple people popping over.
Awesome.
But yeah, what's up, everybody? Hello.
What's up? What's
Good
up?
evening.
Thank you for tuning in, Farsight. Always good to have you. Yeah. So in terms of today, our main topic, we're going to be taking a look at some matches. We're going to be doing some commentary and analysis, and we'll hopefully be trying something out tonight, which is like I have like a little chalkboard set up so I can like draw and do some stick figures for us. For us to like talk about a play and sort of move stuff around. We'll see how that goes. It's definitely something I've been thinking about and trying out. Because like I always see these like basketball games and it's like when the coach pulls out the backboard, in my mind it's like it's one of those moments. So I'm like, okay, cool, let's try that. So before we go into some of the commentary and gameplay, I just wanted to start off with some very basic questions for Sir Dimwee. Specifically, questions like how'd you get started in Echo? Like what got you into the game and what got you into casting and doing all these events that I see you in?
That was a very gradual process. It was back in 2017, summer of 2017. I had a paycheck, and I just upgraded my gaming rig, and it happened to be VR capable. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna jump in. I'm just gonna. It's time to take the dive. And so I did. I went out and I bought. I researched first. I actually researched. Do I want an Oculus or do I want a what was the other big one at the time? I always forget the name of it because I don't use it. It's the Revive, the Vive. Yeah, the
HTC
ACC Vive. And I was like,
HTC
so I looked it up, and what everybody said was the Oculus had a better visual experience, but the Vive had a better like tracking experience. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm more interested in visuals, so let's go with the Oculus. And that's how I made the decision. I wanted a prettier screen, and so I got the Oculus, and then started playing around with it. And I think one of the first things I did was play Star Trek Bridge Crew because I'd heard about that and saw it, really wanted to try it, and that was also the first VR experience I fell asleep inside of, and
Really?
simultaneously the first VR experience I woke up inside of.
Okay.
So that was a pretty gnarly experience, waking up, on the bridge of the Enterprise. That was pretty cool. Because you wake up in that stupor and you're like, wait, what the hell? Then you realize no.
Yeah.
So that was fun. And then let's see. So through that, obviously, I discovered Echo, and Echo. I remember the moment I popped in Echo, and I've retold the story a bunch of times, but so I've stopped retelling it because I started telling it all the time for a while,
Sure.
and then I stopped. So maybe it's okay to bring it to start talking about it again. My first day in, I'll never forget just how real, like it felt more so than any of the other VR experiences I tried yet, and just absolutely how mind blowing it was to me that it was such a this living experience. And that was 2017, and I started playing in that summer. And I remember I was on a break at work, and I remember telling my boss, I vividly remember this discussion. This is summer evening, 2017, outside of the shop, just telling her like, I don't feel like I'm playing a game. I feel like I've discovered something new. Like I feel, and that's the word I kept using. I feel like I discovered something. Like it didn't feel like I had played a million video games up to this point. I had experienced everything there was to experience in gaming, and I was like, but for the first time, I feel like I've discovered something. Like this is not the normal experience, and that's what got me into it. And then I played very casually for a very long time. Nobody knew I was, nobody knew who I was. I didn't know who anybody was. I didn't know who Eclipse was. I didn't know who Powder was. Or Lemming, well, I knew who Lemming and Powder were because their faces were always on their pictures were always up in the lobby. And they were always world champions. And I distinctly remember practicing my throw, bouncing the disc off of Lemming's face. He was because it was a perfect, it was the perfect size, and it wasn't a perfect circle because it was, it's a face, so it's oblong, so it gives you a little bit more up and down on the throw. You know what I mean? Which is what I needed, that variance. Yeah. So his face worked perfectly to practice my throw. And but aside from that, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anything, and it wasn't until I think ESL 2. I played one day. I was on a team with Ender's Lot, who is the first level 51 in the game, and Hasco. We were a team for one day. Our first game was against Eclipse, and they absolutely demolished us. There's a stream of it somewhere. I've never been able to find it, but it does exist. And then I played all of ESL Season 3, but still at that point, it was very casual, and that was with a couple folks over in ESL. And then I kind of got... really, the turning point was Beer League. It was summer 2019, and someone told me about Beer League. I joined Beer League, and that's when I started connecting with people. That's when I actually started, making a lot of friends in the game and whatnot, and meeting people, and that's when VRML kind of started. VRML kind of came up not long after that, and I was a little bit involved in the initial creation of VRML, and then I was no longer involved in it at all. Just the initial discussions I was there for, and then once it happened, I was no longer part of any of that. I was just playing, and then it was that first week, Palador. Because they originally I wanted to apply as a caster, and I convinced myself not to because I thought, I want to play, so they don't want someone who plays who's also a caster. They don't want that, so I'm not going to apply. And it was during that first week. It was like the Tuesday or Wednesday. Howler said, we still need more casters. So if you want to apply. I was like, well, if they still need them, they probably won't care that I play. So I'll just sign up. And that's how I got into casting, and it was there. It's incidental because I did say I didn't want to talk too much about my personal life, but I will say,
tell me.
I was a musician for a very long time. I played guitar and drums and all sorts of stuff in bands and all that. But I stopped playing like 5 years ago. I lost it. It was gone, and I was lost. I didn't know what to do because that was my thing. That was the thing I was good at. That was the thing that worked for me, and it was gone. And it turns out that casting is just another form of performance. It's another stage performance. Sure. It's literally all it is. And once that clicked, like, I'm just on stage again. It was. You know what I mean? I knew what I was doing from that point on. The moment I realized casting was performance, I knew what I was going to do. I knew exactly where I was headed, and we haven't looked back.
Okay, so on the topic of performance, right? Yeah. You got, I remember one of my last conversations with you was you mentioned I think it was at one of the LANs, right? It was an in-person event, and you mentioned about being on was it being on the Jumbotron? Was that? Or was that no?
That was at Nepaland,
right? Or
the Nepaland.
There was one moment I remember you were so excited. So you started casting, you mentioned performance. So I'm curious, what are some of your highlights in terms of performing as a caster or in Echo?
So to give you an idea as to how big I imagine this game getting, in my mind, my highlights haven't happened yet. I know it seems like I know I can look back and there's a lot of awesome things and a lot of moments, and I'll list them in a moment, but to give you an idea as to how big I think Echo is supposed to be, in my mind, none of those things that you want to hear about have even happened yet. Because I expect things to just continue to get bigger, and I expect those moments, the ones that we really are going to look back on, have yet to occur. And I know that's a lot of wishful thinking, but that's how I see what we're doing. That's how far ahead my head is in everything that's going on. That's why I'm so headstrong about so much. But in earnest, I guess big moments like the Nepaland at the St. Louis Cardinal Stadium, kind of being able to interact with an audience that I could hear through the walls and the windows, knowing that I was on, me and Nails and Brutus and those guys were on the big screen, and the players as they were playing in the game were on that big screen, and you could hear our voices in the stadium, which means you could hear our voices in the streets, and talking and being able to. One thing I always wanted to do was, I don't know if you ever saw the performance of Queen at Live Aid.
Yeah,
back in the 80s. Yeah. It was the 90s. Yeah, yeah. Well, that whole performance, the entire performance is just legendary, and the way Freddie Mercury engaged with the audience and the way he did those call and answers, where he'd be like dee da da dee da da da, and then the
Yep, yep.
audience would go dee da 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 or whatever. I always wanted to do that, and I got to do that at that stadium. So that was probably one of my bigger highlights currently is being able to
Awesome.
do that call and answer, the Freddie Mercury call and answer with the audience in the St. Louis Cardinal Stadium. That was cool.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
other than that, big, it was just finals numbers. Any VRML finals is always a major thing in my mind, and everyone that we've done has been the biggest and best yet, and I
Sure.
can't wait to do bigger and better ones, continuing on moving forward.
For sure. And, the fact that, you're filling out a stadium and being able to talk and hear the audience there with you, man, that, again,
Yeah.
it's just going to get bigger and bigger over time, right? So I think that's so exciting.
Oh yeah.
It's like there's definitely a bright future ahead. Hopefully. Hopefully.
Well, like I said, man, that's where my head is. My head is so far ahead that I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean highlights? We're not there yet. Like, like it took me a minute to, I had to sit back a little bit, going, okay, there are highlights, there are things we can. But no, that's where I go. It's how much further I think we have to go yet.
Yeah. So as we talk about, you being on the jumbotron on NEPA, the first thing we're going to take a look at tonight is actually one of the NEPA matches of Barracuda versus Lion. This is by popular request from my boy Billy Brick Wall, who really wants to take a look at it. So we're going to be taking a look just at round 1 and round 2 of that. We're not going to take a look at the whole match just because of time constraints, right? We don't want to get, we don't just want to watch one match this whole show. So we're going to take a look at that first. And as we do that, we're just going to chat and talk and just sort of hang out, And as you're talking about beer league and all that, I do want to mention that this on Veritas is from Gil, who started beer league. So this is all just in my mind.
Well,
it's all
actually, and Gil would correct you as well.
Really?
Actually, Essen started beer league. Gil has been a big, yeah. There, Essen in the chat very quick
Yes.
to react. Yeah, no, Essen
I'm
was
wrong,
the originator of beer league, but Gil has been a big part of it since the beginning.
Yes, Essend, I apologize. I'm wrong. Thank you for tuning in. We're gonna start going into analysis, and we will go into the real MVP, Essend. So we're gonna be taking a just look at one of the first rounds. As it starts, as you can see, Essend is actually playing on Barracudas, I believe. So we're gonna be taking a look at you some more right now. Again, quick goal to start. Blue side. I believe orange side scoring on blue. Now, one of the reasons I want to take a look at this match, again, we're going to take a look at Barracudas, of course. We're going to take a look at Billy Brick Wall. But I also want to just talk about, your thoughts on NEPA and sort of the formats. I know that VRML transitioned from, like 3v3. Like, before it was 3v3 and then went into 4v4. And now we have all these different rule sets as well. Like, what are some of your favorite rule sets in essence, SirDimwi, or where do you think is the next step for Echo?
Well, just to clarify the history of the 3v3, VRMO never actually played 3v3. That was a rule decided on as we were starting. So preseason was the first. Well, actually, it was Pizza League that started experimenting with 4v4. And prior to Pizza League, the thought of 4v4. If you ask anybody about 5v5 right now, the reaction you get is the reaction you used to get about 4v4. And it wasn't until Pizza League tried it. Pizza League was like, we're just going to do it and have fun, and the winner gets a pizza. Yeah. Pizza League tried it, and at the end of at first it was the chaos everybody expected, but eventually people worked out the strategies and the meta started working out. And eventually got to the point where it's like, actually, this is a lot more fun than 3v3 because it's faster. You've got the natural pairs, the two stacks, the optional two stacks, and everything. And so it was going into VRML because VRML kind of grew out of Pizza League, although it was a couple other folks outside of Pizza League that were involved in that. But it kind of Pizza League was really the soil where the league of VRML kind of grew from. Mm-hmm. Even though VRML existed prior to Echo, VRML had been around for about 2 years in the Onward community, Onward and Pavlov and some other games. Mm-hmm. So they picked up. So they picked. I forgot. I kind of lost track of where we were at here.
So 3v3. Echo Arena, some of the competitive
Echo Arena
3v3,
all right, so
4v4,
yeah,
NEPA rule set, Party League, 5v5s. There's so many different.
So yeah, where are we
pieces.
headed in the future? Yeah.
Where do you think?
I think the future is going to be variation. I think your big leagues like VRML and NEPA, the Pro Series and whatnot, are going to kind of set their standard, and that will be like the pro rules, and then you'll have your pub rules, which will be your kind of your street hockey rules, your casual amateur rules, and then you're going to have things like Party League. So I like to think back to StarCraft 2 had a game mode called Arcade, and it was basically they gave you everything you want, all the game pieces, all the mechanics, the coding, whatever you wanted to do with their stuff, you could do and publish within their arcade. Now, they owned it. That was kind of part of the deal. It was like you could do anything you wanted with it, but they owned whatever you made. Sure. But you could make whatever you want. And that's kind of the future I hope to see as far as, because there's so many cool things that we could do, and that starts with start with the obvious stuff like shout out to the Chiefs with the offsides rules, which was a really interesting one. Of you can't enter the bubble until the disc enters the bubble if you're attacking the bubble. Like that was their offsides rule. It's just like in soccer, you can't get behind the defense unless the ball is back there, right? You have to stay a certain. There's a certain. There's those offside rules in Echo. The Chiefs came up with their offside rule, and it was you can't enter the bubble until the disc enters the bubble. And that was a really interesting one. We've never played with it, but it's very unique. There's also the one I've always wanted to play with is threes only. I want to see threes only perma goalies. I would love to see that. It'd be very low scoring, but it'd be very interesting. It'd be hockey style, and all sorts of other cool, fun, cool stuff. Tournaments with disc curve on, and super mega ultra turbo hyper, whatever that game mode was. Tournaments with that would also be a lot of fun. And then take that and then just go to the extreme Echo Grand Prix of custom game modes where you're having stack races and stuff like that. So that's where I hope to see it go in the future, is to where we have our core leagues and our core rule sets. But then if you want to venture out, I want you to be able to venture into all the options. I want them all to be out there.
Yeah, so, on that topic of all these other options, we have redeemed a question. EJP 2016 is asking, thoughts on a 5v5 with a semi-dedicated QB/goalie/rover?
So, there's... he followed it up as he said the SirDimwi game format, because there is a format that it's the threes only. It would be threes only 5v5 perma goalies, but the goalies are perma goalies in the sense that they can do whatever they want in the bubble, but if they leave the bubble, they're not able to shield, and they can't go past half court. Okay. So they can come out and play the disc, but if they're out, they're vulnerable, and they can get stunned out, and there's nothing they can do to defend themselves. So if if the goalie comes out of that bubble, you stun them out, you can get them trapped outside of the bubble, they lose your goalie, right?
Yeah.
So it's that kind of trade-off. That was a format I always want to see. 5v5 with basically perma goalies. I would also not mind seeing this 5v5 generally. I know Essen is going to love it. I wouldn't mind seeing 5v5 generally. Now, I don't want to see it necessarily in VRML because that's a whole thing, getting a change like that in. But I would be interesting to see some semi-serious league try it out, at least in some competent capacity, and see how that meta works out. And if because in a case like that, you might end up with a permanent backline. You might end up with someone who really doesn't attack the bubble ever. I'm curious how that would work out in the meta.
Now, as you're talking about these somebody, the goalie not being able to shield, in my mind it's like having roles, right? And as you talked about, having goalie, and now we can self-impose those roles in a game, but in my mind it's like, if there was an option for these roles even in the game or on the console, where someone could be like, hey, you disabled blocking past a certain point. For me, that would be I don't know. I know Spark has so many things we can do, and I'm curious if that's... go ahead.
There's a lot of cool stuff in Spark. You actually reminded me of a really, really old idea that hasn't come up in a while, and that's chassis classes. So think in if you, I don't know if you ever played NHL on the PlayStation, but you can pick player types, like the type of player you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like
Yep.
playmaker, sniper,
Yep.
bruiser, defensive defenseman, offensive defense, all that kind of stuff, right? And they give you different stats, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're either
Yep.
better at shooting, or you're
Yeah.
better
Yeah.
at defending, or you're better at checking and fighting and all that kind of stuff. And in Echo, it'd be interesting to have variable chassis where maybe
Mm-hmm.
you're playing a striker chassis that has a higher top speed, but you can't stun. You can
Sure.
go 8 meters a second unassisted, and maybe you get a little bit more boost when you're regrabbing, but you're completely unable to stun or block. You can't do anything about stunning. And and then you have your bruiser class who maybe has a permanent shield,
Mm-hmm.
and if they touch you or something, all sorts of little cool things that might be interesting to change it up a little bit. The things that because the thing I always worry about is the next thing. The next thing, I would say I worry about it because my life isn't completely 100% I'm not uh, utterly attached to Echo. If something new came in and usurped it, we could all make that transition. But
Sure.
I would hope I would hope Echo would be able to develop in a way that would be able to withstand that. And in my mind, to do that, it is to introduce these options for people to play a while or play around with, because maybe they will find something they like better that they could then officially publish as a developer. We wouldn't have to worry about someone coming in and usurping the place.
Absolutely. As you're talking about these different rules, in my mind, it's like labs, if that makes sense. There's
Yeah.
like I play like League of Legends sometimes, and there's like these different game modes that get tested out on like
Yes.
on a
Yeah.
basis, right? And it's like in my mind, and
I play Teamfight Tactics. Same thing.
yeah, exactly. So there's these different things that I would love to see. Again, we have some leagues like that are on Veritas, like the Lefty Cup. Only playing with your left hand. That was even just like we were
Yeah.
having some shows about. And there's also ones where like there's like brawling cups, stuff like that. So there's all these different options from the community. I would just love to see it being implemented, even or allowed to be implemented in the game somehow, maybe through an API or something like that, where it's like, if you click this button on this API, then you can't block when you're outside a bubble, or something like that.
Yeah.
That would be really cool. Now, one of the questions that gets asked a lot actually is, what is the future of the pro scene? Right? Like, where do you think the next step is? And you mentioned before how like we haven't even hit the highlights yet. We're not even there yet, right? So in your opinion, like where do you see Echo going in like a year or two? Like once it gets big, for example, what do you think that actually looks like?
We don't know. We really don't know, because it's easy to all right, now, because those are two very different questions.
Sure.
What I think Echo looks like in a year or two. What do I think Echo looks like once we hit it? Once it
Sure.
it blows up, and whether or not, and that's another question, whether or not it blows up, because that has a lot to do with whether or not VR does. But that also comes down to headset sales. So in 1 to 2 years, I'm hoping we're at a point where things are a little bit more viable in terms of the ecosystem being able to support folks to support the game full time, like as a career, as a job, as a career. Maybe right now as a 1 to 2 years as a job, but eventually as a career, because that's the sort of thing. You look at a game like League of Legends. There's a full outside ecosystem of that pro scene of people who have full time careers that
Yeah.
are just in a position that supports something that is supporting that game. And that's the kind of ecosystem I really want for Echo Arena. I want playmakers. I want you to be able to do this professionally,
for sure.
and that requires Echo or a tangentially related game that you could then
Sure.
cover, something to take it to the next level. And we're not quite there. So in the next 1 to 2 years, that's what I want to see, is the beginnings of that. We're starting to see it a little bit,
Sure.
but it's still only just trickling in. I really want to see the beginnings of that ecosystem where people can actually start building
Yeah.
actual jobs and careers around the game. And what was it? Sorry, what was the question? Go back to the question. I keep doing
Yeah,
this.
so
What was the question?
these are great sort of segues into different questions. So I'm not specifically attached to any question. I'm happy to keep rolling
Okay.
with it. But what you mentioned actually reminds me of a point for like League of Legends, like for Teamfight Tactics, a lot of Riot games. There's actually camps where players like live together and play, right?
Yes.
So in my mind, it's like that would be really cool to have an Echo, because the amount of ping you would have if you like were like if you were living in like the same apartment building, because this is like an Echo camp and like this is like a professional team. This is your whole career. Like I can imagine like like 5 ping or 10 ping, and just the amount. It would be so different, I think, compared to how it is now, where like I'm playing with someone from like Virginia and I'm in Colorado, and it's like, yeah, our regrabs are, you know, you get ghost pulls.
Well, no, I mean that also comes into the possibility of these the private servers, of being able to spool up your own server and play on that server. So that would just enforce all that there as well. Those camps would be able to have literally you'd be able to play on like 5 ping, 10 ping. Yeah. The same in the same facility, that kind of stuff. But no, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's part of that ecosystem is people are literally build it. They're putting camps together for these kids to play. We absolutely, and what's great about Echo is unlike other camps, and I don't want to poo-poo esports. This is not. I am in no way attacking esports. I'm not saying VR sports are better than esports. They're different things. They're very different things.
Very different.
One of the benefits. And I think someone of your career influence can appreciate this. Unique, and I know you do. I'm confident you do. One of the things that's great about VR sport is that you send your kid to this camp. They're not just sitting on their ass all day. They are getting they're working their ass off. In fact, you know what I mean. And it's not just you're not just getting the mental benefit of being playing on a team sport and learning team management and all that stuff. You're not just getting the hand-eye coordination stuff. You're also getting a physical workout, and you're also getting genuine health benefits that aren't just psychological. And that's one of those things that I think will really benefit us once this wave really starts picking up. That's going to be one of the things that continue to drive its momentum, is the fact that it's going to be so healthy to play video games.
Absolutely. Okay, so on the topic of being more physical, because I have a background in injury rehab and working with exercise, the potential I see in terms of Echo, in terms of physical training, there's almost none. There's zero. It's like, in my mind, it's like every sport, like right now with baseball, right? There's like motion capture where you can see exactly how your throw, the angle of your throw, and be precise, right? Like there's like specific sports training for these things, and like in my mind right now, Echo is like a free-for-all. It's like we're so new that it's like there's no specific sports training. Like, hey, you want to be a better juker, right? Here's how you work on your vertical, right? Like there's so many pieces there.
But you know what because you're totally right about that, because it doesn't exist yet though. And what's going to be really cool is our tools are going to be built in a way that from the very beginning, we're going to get data that baseball coaches didn't get access to for over 100 years. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to see exactly how you're moving, how you're turning your wrist, how you're doing that thing, and what we can do to, one, improve that, make it more quick, make it more efficient, and also how to actually tell someone else how to do it. Because that's the one thing that's really hard to do, is that translation of like, well, you flick your wrist. Well, what do you mean I flick my wrist? I'm flicking my wrist. Nothing's happening. You know what I mean? There's that mistranslation there that we kind of have, that you're describing something that they can't see through a language that they don't quite understand. You know what I mean? There's that disconnect, and to be able to eventually we'll have the tools like Replay Viewer right now is kind of the first step in that direction of those tools. You'll be able to use Replay Viewer to go, all right, here's his physical metadata that's occurring at that at this time.
So in my mind, because VR already has like motion capture tied into the system itself, and because Echo Replay Viewer you can do that, the only thing is right now it doesn't have that analysis there yet. I think the raw data is actually there from the API, but there's no from the API, there's actually the raw data. But what I would love to see, right, and this is something that we should actually bring up to like NTS France and all those people, is like, hey, by the way, can you give us a side-by-side, a slow-mo of game throwing threes? Like, can we actually like, can we like? I would love to have like a frame by frame of like, hey, this is how game actually throws. Here's how his controls actually move, right? Like based on like, because we have all the data, and I know Spark tracks some of the data of like, hey, these are the most like some of the best. These are some of the most accurate players. Here's where the most common shots are. What I would love to see is almost this like wireframes of like, here's like some of the most accurate throws in the game. Like when like here's a sample size of 10,000 people. Here's them. Here's like the best threes overhand in my mind. It's like, hey, if you could collect that data of like when this, does that make sense? I'm not sure if I'm articulating it.
Yeah,
really
no,
well.
you can specifically instruct someone how to do it.
Yeah, I would.
You can specifically instruct someone on how to do it. They can do it and compare their data points to those data points. And go, okay, if I got to release 5 degrees, a half a second later, I'm not pulling back far enough. My arc is too inconsistent. Exactly. All that stuff. Yeah, I know exactly what you're getting at.
Yeah, I would love to have that where if there was a tool, and I think that would be, in my mind, that's like the sports tool of like, because I've worked with tools like that where it's like, what was it, rep, like what was it, like sensei or something like that, but like for weightlifting, they put a little sensor on it so that you can see exactly the motion of your bench press, etc., of your squat. So it'd be like, oh, by the way, you did a bit of a curve as you came down for the squat. You lost a certain amount of momentum and force because of X and Y, right? In my mind, it'd be like, if there was that data, it was like, hey, your throw, you didn't do a full swing, or like, there was no wrist flick on this throw, and it could be like,
yeah,
okay,
exactly, yes.
Okay, this is what you need to change. Like that for me would be like a very cool like coaching tool, but it would also be like the next level of analysis where it'd be like, if there was in my mind, it's like in VRML, right? You know how like you have like the little camera where it's like, they just made like an amazing shot. It'd be like they made an amazing 3, and then you can see the wireframe, them slow-mo of them actually like throwing it, like the whole motion of them doing it. That would be awesome.
Yeah. That would be, yeah.
In my mind, again, there's so many different pieces. There's lots of things that are going on. One of the questions that Farsight actually has, in terms of critiques of the game, like he's asking about like the game like spawning more disc, and we talked about things like disc curve. We talked about different features like goalie ping advantage. That's sort of new, right? What is there anything that you know of that you think is going to be like the next feature or the next thing? Like, do you have any information on where you think the next step is in terms of like these features?
So it would the thing would be, we want to see in that regard, and I don't know where everything is at. I'm a little bit the whole API stuff is a little bit over my head. I try to stay up on it as best as I can, but I don't actually know the ins and outs of API. I just know like the what would ultimately be the feature of if they did this is what we would get, and that's the thing I understand. That's once we get to that point. Okay, I understand what that is. Mm-hmm. And some of that stuff that Farsight brings up there, like spawning multiple discs and stackable lanes. Although I don't know what he means by stackable lanes, but target spawning, training, and other things. What we want there is they were referring to it as write API, basically being able to write to the API of the game. Now I don't know how that comes up, but basically it means modding. Basically it means modding the game, and that's what we're looking at. That's the dream there. That's the dream, is to be able to create training modes. If they came out with a modding to where somebody could legitimately write a training mode, you would have 20 of them come out in a few weeks. I'd want to do my own. Venom would want to do his own. It'd become a branding thing for some people. It would also become, Ignite would want to do their own. You know what I mean? It would immediately overnight. You would have 1 million training programs on how to be better at this, how to do better at this, and do this for 2 hours a day, do this for 2 hours a day. You know what I mean? Follow my training program. It could be a scripted thing that you go in. Yeah. You have your 30-minute training thing every Friday or every day you do after work. The thing that Jaywalker wrote. It gives you a good workout and you get better at the game. That's pretty cool. So I know stuff like that is possible. I know it's going to happen. It's a matter of when and no matter of how ultimately. But all that stuff is really exciting. That is the dream, and it will happen someday.
Okay, so as you're talking about all these possibilities, right? If you had the option to write your own training module, so what would be the SirDimwi training module?
I would have to focus it around goalie because that's the only thing I feel like I have enough experience to even talking. But even at this point, on it, basic rollouts. Basic rollouts for the new player, for someone who wants to learn how to do so. Like, teach them. So in my mind, it'd be something like there's 4 positions. You pick which one you want to do, and that's the one that you'll load up in. And so let's say you're gonna set up for a standard split, right?
Sure.
You could play each position. You can play the goalie, or you can play the quarterback. You can play the guy going left two. You can play the guy going right 2. You can play the guy going center. Just pick the position you want, and that's what you'll load into in that training module. And so you just do that over and over and over again. Get used to like, oh, this is what it's supposed to look like. This is where I'm supposed to go. If I go here, I can manipulate the defense. Oh, this is all the cool things. Suddenly you start realizing all the variables, all the variations that can apply in those situations. And that would honestly be, now that I'm thinking about it, that would be what I would go after is basic rollouts to learn. Just because I put out a TikTok not too long ago, and it's 3 basic rollouts that'll improve your team overnight if you're stuck down in bronze or whatever. Sure. And that would be it's the stack breaker, standard split, and the relay. And stack breaker is just whatever you want to do with that 4th man. Your 3 guys set up in a triangle in your defensive zone. Simple stuff like that. That can where I'm at, because I don't play at that top level. Even though I have a lot to say about it.
Sure.
I feel like I'm not totally qualified to coach on it. So then, but I do feel like I can coach the newer players and bring the floor up, floor of the game, if that makes sense.
So
I guess that would be where my focus would be on stuff like that.
Yeah. So okay, as you're talking about that, I remember. So because we're talking about like basic rollouts, what's really interesting for me is the fact that yes, you're saying it's some of the most basic rollouts. At the same time, there are players at the master level that say like, I remember, what was it, Aaron or something, was like, they only ran relay for like a whole, like they only ran, what was it, I think single shot ethereal only ran standard split for like a whole season. Only ran standard split. And I think I believe it was Aaron Knight or one of the other players that I interviewed that was like, they only ran relay. Like for like at the highest level of play, right? They're only running some of these most basic plays. So I would love to hear from you. What do you think makes the difference in terms of how, what do you think differentiates these simple plays versus these master tier plays?
Whoa, that's a whole that comes down to just execution. I mean, I formation in football is an I formation, whether you're playing in high school or a professional. You know what I mean? It comes down to how well you execute, and it's really, and that execution comes down each individual player's individual choices from beginning to end. You know what I mean? Whether you're going to go towards the wall or go towards this player, you're going to take the man out, or you're going to fake the man, or you get all those little questions that everybody's answering at every step of the way. That over time, it's that game sense that you develop, that a player develops. That everybody has to be, at that same high level if you want to see a high level play. So it also comes down to, and also that the whole just running a single play. It's not that it's unviable to only run a single play. It's that that's one of the. It's one of the tools in your tool, but you don't want to have a toolbox full of tools and use a hammer on everything, right? Sure. Obviously, you have a box of screws. You can hammer the screws into the wall. They'll go in. They'll hold stuff up. But that's not what they're made for, and you would do a better job if you actually started using that screwdriver on those screws. You know what I mean? Sure. So it's not that you can't compete at these high levels with with a very simple playbook. It's that if you're not going to utilize the playbook, a team that's everything else being equal, a team that does utilize the playbook and does play the Yomi game, as it were. Yep. That team is going to be at an advantage over your team, and that team is statistically more likely to beat your team.
Okay, so as you're talking about Yomi, and I remember watching your specific video, and I actually used to play a game called Yomi, which was a card game. But again, that was it's the phrase from Japanese, right? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, as you're talking about Yomi and talking in my mind, it's you're adapting whatever you're doing to what the enemy's doing. They're adapting to what you're doing, and it's this game of mental chess that's happening, right? Can you right now, as you know, as we're talking, I'm bringing up a screen on the side where I can draw on the field, right? So we can like sort of like I'll draw stick figures as we're talking about this. Can you give us a sort of a taste of Yomi, right? Can you give us a taste of like, hey, someone's running standard split. You counter them with X or Y. Like, you know, can you give us a taste of what Yomi looks like, or that mental chess game in Echo?
I mean, so yeah, you run out with a standard split, and let's say you've been doing that over and over and over again, and you know they know that if they pressure your quarterback, he's going to send that first pass, and if you pressure that first pass, they're going to second. You know it's going to be quick, and you know that second pass is never going back to the quarterback. So suddenly, you know that they. So let's say, so you're running. You're going to run. Your defense going to run a 1-1-2. You send that first guy after the quarterback. You just go ahead and be aggressive with it, right? You know that first pass is going to a two. Is they're going to send it to a tube because for some reason they never send it mid. The quarterbacks just love sending it to a tube. So you're going to send your second guy to one of those tubes. Doesn't matter which tube he picks. He just needs to go to a tube to shut down one of those pass options. Because assuming you're going to oh, I just had the commercial pop up. Assuming that whatever it is, so you're going to send one guy to the tube, one guy to the quarterback, and you know that's assuming the other team is as competent as you are, they're not going to send that pass to that guy.
Yeah.
And you know they favor tubes. That stack in the backfield is now going to know. All right, so you send your first guy out to the quarterback, second guy, let's say I'm going to go left tube. All right, he's going left tube. You now know there's like an 80% chance that first pass is going to that right tube, and you can send your stack is already prepared for it. They're looking to just confirm that that's where it's headed. They have a jump on it. They can get there before the disc does, and they can force a turnover immediately. Sure. So that's not the Yomi game. That is a counter. That's a counter to the standard split. Right? They've read they're countering your standard split. They're now running the 1-1-2. Well, that means they're going to be vulnerable in your zone because they've got two guys split up there. You're going to be able to pass around those guys. You're going to have to force that backstack. So instead of running the standard split now, you know they're coming with a 1-1-2. Your Yomi game is, all right, we're going to change up. We now believe they're coming out with a 1-1-2. So they know what you're doing. You know they know what you're doing. So now you're going to call what they're doing, and you come out with a chain breaker. Even though you're not fighting a chain, you're going to come out with a chain breaker because you want to get one of those individual players who are attacking aggressively out of the play. You want to get them stuck behind you, right? So you come out in a chain breaker and you send one guy to each Pac-Man and one guy nest, and then you have your fourth man somewhere out at mid, maybe looking to track down their stack or just to set themselves up open for an out pass or get away from that middle man, the middle one there. And you come out and you're going to start playing monkey in the middle with that first guy, that first aggressive guy, and you wait for that single stun to get him stuck behind, and suddenly he's floating behind the play as your entire team is now moving up the field in a 4v3. And your Yomi, the fact that you are no longer running that standard split, just gave you a 4v3 advantage running through mid, possibly able to push all the way up to the bubble. And that's how Yomi works out. But then the Yomi is they now know you're running a chain breaker, so they might end up being like, you know what, we're going to run a double stack, and we're going to run it passively, so you're going to have to progress up out of the chain breaker. Otherwise, you're just going to be sitting in your own zone. So that's how Yomi works out is call and answer, is a strategic decision making in response to the other team's strategic decision making.
Yeah. So as you're talking about these chess pieces, like one move into the other, right? One thing for me is in terms of the Echo meta, it's like the moves aren't fully established. Like I don't know what all the moves are, right? Even though I've been playing and doing all the commentary and all this stuff, it's like in my mind, it's like I don't. I would love to hear from you. What do you think are the most common plays in my mind? It's like what are the pieces of Yomi? Like if let's just say a newer player is starting the game in Echo, right? And it's like, hey, they're starting to think about this mental game, right? What would your advice to them be?
You can simplify this because if you start considering every single possible variable that every alternative decision a player can make at any given time, your potential options are innumerable. There's a million of them. There's a
Sure.
million different things you can do. And so that's why, in my 3 minute meta series, I try to break it down into those three basic schemas. And I even kind of go a little bit further. I published a video on attack vectors, which is kind of it's a real term, but I'm using it in a very loose way.
Sure.
And basically just to identify that you have on offense and defense, you have three basic schemas. You have a passive, an aggressive, and a defensive. That's it. Everything works into one of those schemas. Either you're being aggressive, you're being passive, or you're being defensive. It's one of those three things. And a standard split is passive. Chain breaker is defensive, and a relay is aggressive. You know what I mean? And what determines how do you know if it's passive, neutral, or if it's aggressive, passive, or defensive? Where are you first intending to engage with the other team with the disc? At what point do you expect to first have a 1v1 with the disc? And that's how you know basically which schema it is. And you look at a chain breaker, you're going to be playing monkey in the middle. You've engaged with the aggressive stack in your zone, in your own zone. That's a defensive schema. Aggressive schema would be one. You have a relay. You're trying to sneak it past the defense and get it into their zone, where your guy's going to juke around for a minute for your defense for the rest of his team to get into the offensive zone. That's where he's engaging the first time with the disc, is in the offensive zone. It's an aggressive schema. A passive or a neutral, I guess, on offense, a neutral schema would be the standard split, where you're sending a pass to mid. They know you're sending a pass to mid. They're going to attack that pass to mid, and that's where you're going to be engaging, is at mid. You have a neutral schema. A mid schema on offense. On defense, it's kind of a passive schema. You're waiting to see what they do, basically.
For sure. Okay, so
that's so that you can break everything down to those three basic schemas.
Sure, and and I definitely want to talk about, like, so in terms of the schema, what are your thoughts about how to counter each one? And before we even move on to that, by the way, I want to mention Vacant and Billy and these guys and Esan that was here in our chat. We just watched Barracuda, by the way, versus Lions. We just watched the 2 rounds. Right now, we're going to talk a bit more about schema and about Yomi for a second, because this is a topic that I find very interesting, because I love strategy games. I play strategy games on my own all the time, and Echoes. There are players which, like SirDimwi, we're talking about these mental game. And there's also players that are just like, just play pubs. Don't think about it. Just play it. And I'm like, yeah, yes. At the same time, it's like you're at a level of competency. Like, you've mastered this game, and you're doing a lot of these things subconsciously. And the best example for me is Strem. I'm like, what's your thoughts on offense? He's like, I don't have a plan, because if I don't have a plan, they don't know if I don't know what I'm doing, they don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, yes, fantastic, but I cannot teach that to a bronze level player, because they will fuck it up. They can't go in there with no plan. So again, so bringing it back, SirDimwi, you're talking about the schema: aggressive, passive, and defensive, right? What are sort of the counters to that? What are your thoughts?
That comes down to what your team is good at. That's basically where it comes down. Now, it's easy to say the counter to, let's say let's say for defense, the idea is to engage exactly where you're. It's really hard to say. It's really hard to say because, all right, let's say the offense is rolling out with an aggressive scheme. Let's say they're doing a relay, right? And you would think the natural response to that would be a defensive schema from the defense to sit back and wait for them to make that pass and then attack that pass. And a lot of teams actually that will be their choice. But the alternative is to, if you expect that play and you're able to read that, the alternative is to turn that into your favor, is to not attack at the expected attack vector, to not attack where that last pass lands. Is to attack somewhere before that first pass, that guy in tube, the relay, right? That relay individual, the guy who's going to send that stretch pass out. That's the one you want to hit, because then they're caught in transition. They don't expect you to attack there. They don't expect to have to defend that position. Then you've got a guy in your offensive zone who's completely stuck out of the play. Their quarterback immediately has to drop back into the bubble. He's out of the play. Excuse me. He's out of the play. You know what I mean? And so it really comes down to what you're good at, what you're capable of doing in that moment, and what your team's preference is in attacking a specific schema. Because your team might be really, really good at a 1-2-1. So you want to see a split. That's the play you want to see. You want to see a standard split because that's going to give your aggressive guy a great opportunity to attack the quarterback because when they run that split, that means they haven't made a decision yet where they're sending the disc. They have to make that decision. They see the 1-2-1. The quarterback's under pressure. He already knows his first pass is going to be under pressure. That's a lot of decision making. You have to make in a split second.
Sure.
Right. And so it really comes down to what your team is good at, what your team prefers. And from there, you decide, okay, where would we prefer to attack this style of offense over, and where can we get an advantage? Where can we even, let's say our preference is here. Well, we can't quite hit that, but the second step, right, we can hit them here. And if we're quick enough, sometimes we'll get them there. Those are where those decisions come in. So it really depends on your team, how your team is made up, and then what everybody's individually good at.
For sure. So what I'm hearing is, as there's all these different kinds of plays, of course, right? But they can be broken down into sort of these main broad categories of aggressive, passive, and defensive. Now, in terms of countering it, it sounds like you really want to play into your team's defensive strength, right? So if you're really good at 1-2-1, you don't want to, would you say a team should just switch up and try to do man if that man hard counters one of the plays? Or would you say play into the defensive strength? In my mind, it's
that gets to the Yomi game, and the big takeaway you should have of the Yomi game is it's rock paper scissors. It doesn't doesn't matter if you're going to choose paper or scissors because you have there's a counter to it. No matter what, there's a counter to your decision, and they might be anticipating your decision based off of their decision. There's a great scene from you can probably pull it up. I don't know. Well, maybe I don't. I don't think it would be so. In The Princess Bride, there's a scene where there's wine, right? And it's presumed one of the glasses of wine is poisoned. The guy sits there forever, and he goes into this infinite pit of, well, maybe you put it in your glass, thinking I would think you put it in my glass, so I would switch them and take your glass, and then I would drink the poison. So it's definitely in my glass, because then if I switch, and he just goes on and on. It's this recursive, infinite recursion of uncertainty, and that's what the Yomi game is. That's what rock paper scissors is. You can say, well, he favors rock, but he knows I know he favors rock, so he's going to go with paper this time. But he knows I know he favors rock, and that I would know he goes with paper, so he's definitely going to go with rock. But then he knows I know that he knows that I know he knows that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You can just do that forever, and that's why these things. But it ultimately, and this is if you watch the Yomi video, I even make that point that's where you end up. The point in Yomi is not that you're necessarily going to get the advantage. It's that if you don't play the Yomi game, you never have the advantage. If that makes sense.
Okay. As you're talking about the Yomi game, and you're talking about because
that's basically what it comes down to. Just pick a random play.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I actually want to tie this in. So one thing from the Strem and Ender interview that really came to mind was Strem was talking about pattern interrupts. Specifically, he's talking about juking, right? So he has disc, and he's saying you juke, and then you punch, right? You try to interrupt the pattern. You're conditioning the enemy team to do something, and then you're breaking that conditioning so that you can get an advantage, right? So
that is I know it's Strem, but that is 100% leverage. That is 100% leverage's approach to the game. He has always been. That's why you'll hear Strem talk about leverage, the greatest mind in the game, because on Kangarillas, the thing he was good at was knowing how to get the other team to do the thing they wanted them to do.
Yes. Okay.
At that point, they would get the advantage. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. It's just when you're saying that, I'm like, oh my god, that is the leverage game plan.
Yes. So in my mind, that's part of the Yomi as well. Yes, there's that mind game, but there's also a piece of you're trying to condition the enemy team to do something specific, so then you can take advantage of that. And it's not just mind game, but it's there's. Again, it's in my mind. It's just pattern interrupts, right?
It's the same thing. You run a standard split. They answer with something. You run the relay. They answer with something. You go back to the split. They answer. You go back to the relay. They answer. suddenly they expect you to run the split again, and you're running a defensive rollout or a fake relay. You know what I mean? Something else to fake them out to take advantage of that pattern recognition. Yeah,
Yes.
there's a lot of stuff like
So okay, so some takeaways from today. There's that Yomi. There's these levels of mind games that's happening, and I also just want to mention that like it's not just. I don't think Yomi is just a passive process. I think you can try to. This comes from NLP, but you can prime your opponent. It's like you can get them to think something because of how you're doing it. One of the most common ways I see this is actually with a headbutt joust. So you come out of both tubes. It looks like a relay, and I remember Rusty Robots. I believe no, Old Ignite, NTS friend like Old Ignite used to do this. I remember
Ignite.
Yeah, back in like season 3 or something, like they would do a relay out of tube, and because they ran relay a few times, the enemy team hard commits to one side. And then they headbutt off of station, and they go left and right, and it turns into more of a standard split. But it looks like a relay, right? It's like you can condition and prime the enemy, like you can do something a few times, get them to think that's what you're doing, and then switch it up on them and take advantage of that.
You were talking about there's that play that Aeronite and them ran that it looks like a standard split, where you're sending that center guy, or I don't know if it's what they ran, but we started talking about this. You send that center guy, you give him an extra boost, and he's going down center, but he's actually waiting to go left or right, and you're waiting. You're gonna be doing a left or right relay that's variable to whatever the defense is rolled out with. And if you're running the standard split over and over again, and then suddenly you run a fake standard split where you're sending you're sending a relay pass, it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing.
Right. So instead of, it looks like a standard split, but it turns into a relay. And before, what I was talking about, the play would be just like you have two people coming out of tube, and what would happen is it would look like a hard commit relay, but because of you hit your head on here, you get one person end up there, one person end up there. So it looks like a relay, but it turns into a standard split. But again, as we're talking about this, in my mind, it's like you want the enemy team to think a certain way, and then to break it, and then to take advantage of it. And it's like that to me is part of that Yomi game, where it's like these mind games, but it's also a little easier because you're just doing it like 2-3 times to condition them and then switching it up. And it's not something that you can do continuously, right? Because then they'll start catching up on it. But you can but during those opportunities, you'll get a chance like where they'll hard commit to right side, right? And now suddenly left side is totally open, and you get a 1v1 opportunity that's super easy, right? Like in my mind, those are some of the pieces, and I would love to chat with you more about this later, like just to have a playbook of like, okay, this is what standard split. Here's the fake out of the standard split. Here's the relay. Here's the fake out of the relay. And like these are just like little things. I'd be like, okay, yeah, they might not win you the game, but hey, it might get you an extra 3, right? And those 3s might matter or might not. But it's like, hey, why wouldn't you take the easy 3, right? So those are some of the thoughts in my mind. We're running up close to out of time right now. Is there anything specific, any plays or anything else that like comes to your mind like, that like that's really interesting? You just talked about Air Knight, but is there anything else that comes to your mind like a really interesting play?
Well, there's a bunch of interesting plays out there. None that I could, if they're interesting because I don't have a read on them. So like, there's that the ace play. Like I have an understanding of how the ace play works, but I wouldn't be able to explain it to you in a way that would be sufficient for like Sloon or a game. Like if I tried to explain to you the ace play in front of one of them, they'd get annoyed and tell me I explained it wrong. You know what I mean? So it's there's plays like that I find interesting because I haven't really tracked down exactly how to explain them and exactly how they work within the meta. Although, but the ace play is basically you're a QB stack, which is one. If you look at all my 3-minute metas, I did not address a QB stack. It wasn't anything I ever talked about. It's not that it wasn't an option. It's just one of those plays that it feels like almost like a special teams play. You know what I mean? It feels like it's not a trick play, and obviously it's not special teams because Ace basically relied on that. Where these Cyclones during Pro Series 1 basically relied on the ace play. But I don't. It's one I wouldn't be able to explain, and I don't really understand how it works out because you hear the way I explain things like aggressive, passive, defensive, all that stuff. doesn't really work out in that scheme there. It's a little bit of everything. It's kind of a variable play, so it's more of a rollout than an execution. And yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff, but nothing really. Nothing that I know there's something, but I can't. Nothing that's really popping into my head right now.
So as we end this show tonight for with SirDimwi, I want to mention that if anybody is interested in hearing how Ace Play is explained, we interviewed Rox as one of our first episodes, and he spent like 20 minutes explaining the Ace Play of how he breaks it down. And he is one of the originators with Game, because he mentioned they started that in Party League with Game, I believe Saluna and Ace, and I believe Rosie. I'm not 100% sure on Rosie, but I think it was. And Game
pretty sure she was there with them, yeah.
And Game wanted to call it the Ace Play because they were called Ace for Party League, and I believe it transitioned into VRML and NEPA as well. But first episode, we definitely need to clip that because like he does a great job of explaining it. A very variable play, as you mentioned. But yeah, just as a little shout out, if anybody is really interested in hearing more about it, check out episode 1 of Playmakers with Rox. But yeah, no, those are really interesting plays, and I think in terms of wrapping it up today I just love your not optimism, but your vision for where Echo is going to be, because I want Echo to be big as well. I love the game, and again, as you mentioned, like discovering something new. As I'm playing Echo, like I remember reading Ender's Game and watching some of the movie like way back, right? And it's like in my mind, I was like, this is it. Like this is like the thing that I never thought would happen that in my lifetime. I'd be like, this is a cool idea, but this is awesome. Like the only thing that would be even better than this in my mind would be actually doing this in 0G, right? That would be the actual
full contact Echo. Sign me up.
That would be one. I think in full contact Echo, this is just a little snippet, right? I believe in the future, if we ever have 0G Echo where we are playing full contact Echo, I believe Jiu-Jitsu is going to play a major part. I don't think striking will work really well. I think it will be a lot of grappling. So that's
you're probably not wrong.
So that's just my in 100 years, if someone's like, oh, we have full G, it's like, oh look, like they have BJJ as one of the core curriculums. Yeah, called that. Anyways, that's it for today. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out and hanging out with us today. This was a lot of fun. Love having you here with us, SirDimwi. We'll love to have you again. Is there anything you want to end us off on? Is there any plugs or shout outs you want to do?
Be casting the NEPA Pro Series 2. I'll be doing like 95% of the Pro Series games. So it's every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, or excuse me, every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday nights. As well, the AAA is running every Tuesday, every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So actually live right now over on the NEPA TV.
Yes,
also,
go check them out.
VRML season 6 is coming up, yes. July 25th. It's a little over a month away. We still have a lot of work to do. It's not far off, and I am on the up. There's nothing official to say, but I am. Things are happening, and everybody's. Things are moving upwards still, and look forward to maybe hearing more about that at some point in the next handful of months. But absolutely. Yeah, everything is things are going really well, and tournaments are going to get even cooler.
Absolutely, that sounds awesome. Looking forward to it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. See you guys next week. All right, good night, folks. Peace.